Mortimer Adler, philosopher, author, writer, educator. I looked through the papers this morning, and there was only one article in all the papers on education. And there's a column written by Steve Chapman in the Washington Times, and I just want to read you one line from that column and see what you think of it. He's a nationally syndicated columnist, and he says here that despite all the rhetoric and money lavished on our schools over the last decade, they haven't gotten noticeably better. The dropout rate is still high, scores are still low, and the bureaucracy is still vast and wasteful.
I agree completely, but I don't think he knows the reason why that's so. In the first place, the one thing that's a little off the point is his reliance on the test scores. They don't measure anything worth bothering with. They measure memory for the most part. The children who get high marks on the test scores are good memorizers and pass the information back and forget it very soon. The people who write about education in this country simply don't know what a good school should be. The Paideia reform, which is the center, my center in North Carolina, the center, National Center for the Paideia program, there we're concerned with two things. Our commitment is to equal educational opportunity, which means that all the children have exactly the same quality of schooling. Same quality. Secondly, that quality includes three kinds of teaching: didactic teaching of subject matter, coaching of skills, and most important of all, seminars on great books for the increase of the understanding of ideas and issues. We have about 125 Paideia schools in this country, 2 in Chicago, an all-black school and one all-Hispanic school in very bad ghettos. That we changed the character of the schools and the teacher in the neighborhood even by doing this. We have a marvelous series of schools in Cincinnati, both elementary and middle and high school Paideia schools where this is going on. The real point about all this is that you can't reform education by all these external things. You've got to have good educated teachers, which you don't have. You have to train the teachers to do this, and you have to have the right kind of curriculum, where the curriculum is based upon kinds of teaching, not on subject matter.
Mr. Adler will be with us for a full hour this morning, and we'll talk here for about 10 minutes, and then we'll go to the phones. 46 books in your lifetime.
Yes, yes.
How have you done that?
Well, for the last 12 or 15 years, I've written 1 book a year. I'm now writing 2 books a year. I write very quickly and easily.
Here's one of your more recent books. It's in paperback. It was written in 1988. Yeah. And it's Reforming Education, the Opening of the American Mind. And you take to task in the... Alan Bloom, because he wrote a thing called The Closing of the American Mind. What's the difference between your theory and Mr. Bloom's?
No difference, except that he doesn't understand the Great Books program well enough, in addition to which he acts as if he invented it. It was invented by John Erskine in Columbia in 1921. I carried it from Columbia, where I taught at Columbia from 21 to 29, to Chicago. We created St. John's College in Annapolis, which is a Great Books College. Bloom doesn't mention any of that. He's really an interloper and quite disgraceful in my judgment.
Great books. Yeah. What is a great book?
Since we've just published the second edition of Great Books of the Western World, I will tell you very quickly. The difference, let me do it this way. Every year in the United States, there are 40,000 books published. Of those 40,000, not 1,000 are worth reading once, carefully. Maybe 809, but 1,000 is the limit. The number of books out of the 40,000 are worth reading carefully. Of those 1,000, probably not 100 or less than 100 are worth reading carefully twice. Of those that are worth reading carefully twice, probably not 1 in every 5 years is worth reading carefully 3 times. A great book is worth reading carefully again and again and again for a lifetime, as I've been doing it since 1921.
Now, you're editor-in-chief.
I'll give you a second distinction.
Okay.
There are lots of good books published every year, but they're relevant to 1 or 2 or 3 ideas. The Synopicon contains 102 ideas. The great books are relevant to 100 ideas, 85 ideas. It's always more than 25. The books, in the Synopicon, we have a list of recommended readings in each of the 102 chapters. Some of the books written by blacks, some of the books written by feminist authors in recent years are in those additional reading lists. They're not in the set. The reason why we didn't put them in the set is because they're not great books. They deal only with a few ideas. The second criterion of a great book is that it deals with a great number of the 128 ideas. There's a third criterion. I'll stop. Every year we have popular bestsellers. They're dead on the shelf next year. They're current. The great books are always relevant to every generation for the last 2,500 years. We don't regard them as archaeological relics. We regard them as contemporary books, always dealing with our problems today.
Okay, for the audience, in case, and I'm sure this is not the case very often, if they don't know who you are the editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia Britannica's great books project.
And chairman of the board of editors of Encyclopedia Britannica.
Encyclopedia Britannica is based where?
In Chicago.
You live in Chicago?
Yes.
Who owns Encyclopedia Britannica?
University of Chicago. The common stock is owned by the University of Chicago.
And this is the second time you've come out with great books?
1952 was the first edition. The second edition is now. Greatly improved, enlarged, and enriched. We have 17 new translations. We've added about 60 authors to the set, 45 in the 20th century, and the Synopicon, which is the key to the set.
Synopicon.
Synopicon.
What is that?
The 2-volume index of the great ideas. If I got time to tell you a story.
Sure.
In 1943, Mr. Benton, Senator Benton,
William Benton,
was then Vice President of the University of Chicago, bought for the university the encyclopedia from Sears Roebuck. Mr. Hutchins and I were teaching a great books class in the University Club in Chicago for the leaders of Chicago Society, and many of them trustees of the University of Chicago. Benton couldn't get the books in the Everyday Man's edition or the Modern Library edition, and he didn't like to go to the libraries and borrow library books he couldn't mark up. Came to Hutchins and me and said, "Will you and Mortimer publish a set of the great books for Britannica?" And Hutchins said, "No, you'll sell them. You can sell them, that's easy. But a set of 54 volumes, within 54 volumes, on the shelf would be just furniture in an American home. I'm not interested in providing furniture in the American home. Unless those books can be taken off the shelf and be read, unless somebody's getting them read, I don't want to publish this. I don't want to edit the great books for you." Benton was very crestfallen. I said, "Give me 2 weeks. Let me see what I can do about getting them off the shelf." In 1943, I wrote a book called How to Think About War and Peace. In preparation for that book, I went back to the great books myself, Thucydides, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Hegel, Hobbes, William James, John Stuart Mill, and so forth. And I found on pages, which I had already read because there were markings on it, I found passages I hadn't marked about war and peace, very significant passages. I said, how can that be? I obviously read that book. Why didn't I see that passage? Again and again I found on pages I had marked passages I hadn't seen about war and peace. And it occurred to me that when I read the books before, I had another question in mind, not war and peace, but some other questions. And that only when you read a book with a specific question in mind do you find the passages on that question. So I said, if we read the great books again and again and again, each time with a different question in mind, we'd find everything they contain. I'd like to make an index to that. I went back to Benton and Hutchins. I said, I think I can produce an index of the great ideas that'll make it possible for people to read in the books before they read through them. Benton said, that's a wonderful idea. And Hutchins said the same thing. How much will it cost and how long will it take? I said, probably about $55,000, $60,000, 2 years, 2.5 years. Benton said, do it. $1.5 million, and 8 years later I did it. No one had ever done anything like this. See, all indices before this were made to single authors. Here I had 74 authors. One index for 70. You couldn't do it with ordinary indexing. You had to invent topical indexing, which I did. and it's an amazing, the Synopicon is 102 ideas. I think I've written 45 books in my life, but I wrote the 102 essays on the great ideas in that Synopicon. And that's the hardest thing I ever did, because every time you write a book, the second chapter is easier than the first, the third is easier than the second. The book pushes along, you see. But if you have to write 102 essays, each is like a book beginning itself. And I did that in 26 months, 7 days a week with no time off.
What year was that?
45 and 46.
And it all came out in 52 originally.
52.
How much does it cost today if you want to buy the Great Book series?
Well, if you buy the Great Books alone without Britannica, about $1,500. If you buy Britannica without the Great Books, it's about $1,500 in the cheap, least expensive binding. But if you buy the two sets together, either set you buy with the other one is half price. And in other words, and by the way, that's a bargain. If you, the present set is 60 volumes, 60 well-bound, beautifully printed volumes. If you were to try to get in paperback, that's it.
Here's a picture. Who's this gentleman?
The chairman of the board, Mr. Gwynn. That's 60 volumes high. If you were to try to find, if you could go to the bookstore and get the content of that set in paperback, all of it. You couldn't do that because much of it isn't in paperback. If you could, and you paid ordinary paperback prices for that set, it would be much more expensive than the set is.
How many do you expect to sell?
That's a guess I can't make.
No idea.
Well,
how many did the first sell?
Well, in the first set, in the years from 52 to 90, we've sold about 700,000.
Now you, back in 1921, you were teaching.
I was a student of John Erskine, who invented the Great Book Seminar at Columbia. I started to teach in 1923, and I had Lionel Trilling in my class and Clifton Fadiman and so forth.
If my calculations are right, that puts you in the 80s.
I'm 88.
How do you keep moving like this, doing all these talk shows?
Very
traveling?
simple. You keep getting younger by working harder every year. I work harder now than I worked 10 years ago. Much harder than now.
We're going to go to the phones. The number is on the screen, or it will be. I'll show the audience the book you're talking about, your latest. This is Professor Mortimer Adler's latest book called Truth in Religion. It's a fairly small book. What were you trying to get at here?
The subtitle, by the way, hold it up again, please. Subtitle at the bottom there says, the plurality of religions and the unity of truth. And if you understand that word plurality and unity, you get the point of the book. There are 10 great religions in the world, 3 of Western origin, 7 of Far Eastern origin. They could all be false, but only one can be true. Well, they're in conflict with one another on many points, and truth requires coherence. They can't be in conflict. Truth is one. When you have a plurality of religions and the unity of truth, you've got a problem of where the truth lies. I say, one answer to the question, given by many people who are quite agnostic about religion, in fact, who regard religions as mythology, is not true at all. But if anyone is concerned, as most faithful persons of faith are, to proclaim the truth of their religious faith, they can't all be right. And this book is an examination of how to find out. It doesn't answer that question. It leaves the reader to answer that question, how to find out where the truth lies.
Let's talk to our audience, or let them talk to you. Ann Arbor, Michigan, go ahead, please.
Brian, what a good program for today. Today is the pagan holiday of New Year, and I would like to ask this rich white male why women...
Rich white male? Rich white male, did you say?
Yes. Why women and children are now so impoverished, since we had the first and the earliest and healthiest religion, which was stolen from us by these male gods, and now they're fighting over our property in the Middle East. Are you familiar with the 500 or so books written on the female religions?
I am terribly sorry. I really like to answer questions, but I do not understand your question. I don't know what you're talking about.
Hello. Do you know, you're writing a book about religion?
Yes, I've just written a book about religion.
Do you know about the earliest religion that was for the first 250,000 years?
No, I don't know about the earliest religion.
How can you not? You're running the Encyclopedia Britannica.
I'm sorry.
What is it?
Of women.
Pardon?
The religion of women, the goddess.
No, I'm sorry that it's not one of the world's established religions today.
Chandler, Arizona, go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Brian. Good morning, Dr. Adler.
Yes, indeed.
I'd like to talk about the decline of the West, especially as enunciated by Oswald Spengler.
Yes, indeed. A very good book.
Very virtually ignored in this country. It seems to me, if you'd permit me to develop my thesis a minute, that the seeds of this decline were first noticed well in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
The French poet Baudelaire said that we shall perish by the very thing by which we fancy that we live. And there were other critics such as Tolstoy and Henry Adams who foresaw the decline and predicted sweeping changes and cosmic collapse, if you will.
Have you read Toynbee?
Yes, I have.
Well, Toynbee seems to me to have the answer to all that. Toynbee came many years after Spengler. Toynbee records the death of 15 or more civilizations, but he predicts, in one of his most recent books, predicts that in the future we will have a world government, a world culture, and a world religion. That's not the decline. That's the decline of the West, but it's the rise of the world.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, you're next.
Yes, Dr. Adler. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you. I never thought I'd ever get this chance. I've read several of your books. I had no idea you'd written so many. But
Which ones have you read?
Pardon?
Which ones have you read?
Well, the one that I'm going to just mention right now is about Aristotle. What was it? Aristotle for Every Man or something of that kind.
Aristotle for Everybody.
Yeah. And the nature of truth and the search for truth. And as I read that, I just agreed 100%. I'd like you to comment on this search for truth with respect to God and with respect to no God and organic evolution within the educational system, particularly the educational system which you envision. And how can you have a search for truth in education if you leave out God and no God and leave out organic evolution? And I'm going to hang up and listen.
God and evolution are two of the 102 great ideas, and everyone who is liberally educated must face questions about God or no God and about organic evolution. Now, about God, I've written, I think, a very good book among those books in recent years. It's a book called How to Think About God. And I think it contains, I'm a long-time student of theology, and I've been concerned with the problem of the existence of God for over 50 years. I think I've come up in that book, How to Think About God, with a good philosophical proof of God's existence, as well as a clear understanding of what God's nature is. That is not, however, the establishment of any religion, because the God the philosopher can prove to exist is not the God, not exactly the same God as the God worshipped, let's say, in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The difference is the God the philosopher can prove to exist cannot be proved to be good, benevolent, merciful, just, concerned with man. And religions go beyond merely to prove the existence of God is quite different from saying, I believe in God. The person who says, I believe in God, is willing to pray and seek God's help and say of his own life, there but for the grace of God go I. Nevertheless, if you look at that book, and I recommend it to you highly, you will see what the leap of faith is. The leap of faith is not from not knowing that God exists to thinking that God exists, but the leap of faith from proving the existence of God in philosophical means to the belief in a benevolent and just God.
Tucson, Arizona, go ahead, please.
Dr. Adler, may I tell you what a big big thrill it is to see you on C-SPAN this morning.
Thank you, thank you.
I've been a fan of yours for a long, long time, by all of your books. And may I tell you, I'm personally involved in your book on reforming education,
Yes.
working with these young people.
Yep.
I can't say what an inspiration it is in telling young people what you would like to do with the educational policy here. It has been great. Are you familiar with the Wisdom magazine that were published?
Many years
Of course
ago,
you are.
there was an article, the whole magazine devoted to me, many, many years ago.
It's exactly right. I've been trying to get old issues of this
How'd you get them? How'd you get
in
them?
a secondhand bookstore.
Yep.
But I would love to get those and frame them and put them in every high school in America for role models for young people.
Thanks for the call. What's your most popular selling book in history?
How to Read a Book.
How to Read a Book. Is it still published? Still buy it?
Written in 1940, it's still selling very well every year.
Paperback.
Since 1940. Long time.
Fayetteville, Arkansas. Go ahead, please.
Brian, thanks for another good and great show, and thanks for carrying the SNL hearings and the budget crisis and programs on the New World Order. And Dr. Adler, it's a very great pleasure to talk with you, and I think the world is in very great need of a book entitled Truth and Religion. I have one short comment and 4 short questions.
Yes.
Comment is, when my children were growing up, we were fortunate in having in our home Encyclopedia Britannica and the great books and the Annals of America.
Good. That's a wonderful set of books.
Great. All my children went on to become national merit semifinalists.
Good, good.
To complete college degrees. And one daughter is now at the University of Chicago working toward a graduate degree in philosophy.
Good.
I believe that your fine publications are extremely valuable and even fun.
Good.
Our first set was purchased used, and a few years later we bought a new set. That's of the Britannica. My first question,
Now you're going to have to get a new set of great books.
I think I will. You're right. First question, I also asked of Ted Turner and Jane Fonda when they were guests on the Larry King Show. The question is, are sports making Americans dumb? And second question...
Are schools making Americans...
Hold on for you. Let's have him answer his question. Are sports making American schools dumb?
No, when they're overdone, they become professional instead of being amateur kind of sports, yes. But they can be controlled properly. In fact, some universities are making athletes actually pass courses.
Second question.
With so much treasure and effort being expended to achieve racial balance in our schools, would you discuss the concept of race and the question, who is black?
The question, who is black, is an impossible question, but I'm a firm believer in the equality of the races. I don't think there are any inferior races. The blacks are not inferior to the whites, or the whites to the yellow-skinned, and so forth.
I like that answer. Third question, in the past you have discussed an individual's quest toward wisdom as being divided into 4 stages. In the first stage, he seeks information, then knowledge, then understanding, and finally, when he is about 70, wisdom.
That's right.
So could you distinguish between those 4 things?
Well, sure. Information is what you find in a telephone book, in directories, and in the Encyclopedia Britannica, information is in the micropedia. Organized knowledge is in the macropedia and the encyclopedia. Understanding of ideas and issues is in the great books, and wisdom is almost nowhere. Wisdom is something that grows slowly. I think there's some wisdom in the great books, but you've got to find it there, and you've got to accumulate, from your understanding of ideas and issues, some wisdom in your own life.
You still read the great books?
Oh, I read them and teach them.
If you had to grab one off the shelf that you would enjoy the most, which one would it be?
Aristotle.
Eugene, Oregon, go ahead, please.
Yes. Well, this is a great pleasure to talk to Dr. Adler. I've admired him for a long time. I received his book when I was...
Which book?
6 Great Ideas.
Yes.
I was a graduate from high school.
Good.
And it gave me direction. Now I'm a graduate student at the University of Oregon here in philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And, geez, there's so many things I'd like to talk to you about, but I was wondering what you thought about Wittgenstein and his later philosophy, And if you think the logical positive is a dead entity.
There's no doubt that logical positivism is a dead end. Wittgenstein is a very great man, but I think not a great philosopher. His education was, I think, very, shall I say, spotty. He's not a good reader of Aristotle and Plato. He's not a good reader of St. Thomas Aquinas. There's a great deal about philosophy he doesn't know. He's asked some questions that were answered long before he asked them. Those who admire him as the great philosopher of the 20th century are themselves poorly educated in philosophy.
On your board of advisors or your committee consultants, you have Isaac Asimov, Daniel Bell, Thornton Bradshaw, William Buckley, Hugh Downs, Stephen Jay Gould, Theodore Hesburgh. Are these the people that help you choose the great books?
They and our editors, yes.
You have Bill Moyers and
Octavio Paz.
Octavio Paz just won the Nobel Peace Prize, or the Nobel Prize for Literature.
What's interesting, when I've been asked why there are no Spanish-American books on the list, I said we asked Octavio Paz about that, and he said there are no great books written by the South Americans yet.
How about women? There are no women on that list.
No, they're in the... Oh, there are 4. Yes.
No, on the list of advisors.
We tried to get Antonio Fraser, the English novelist, and she made us deal with her agent, and that got very complicated, and we dropped it, but we tried to get her.
How about blacks?
There is a black. We have the list of him. He's in Newfoundland. He was the vice regent of the University of Nigeria. His name is Alexander A. Kwapang.
Got it.
Black, African black.
Panama City, Florida, you're next.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
And thank you for C-SPAN.
Thank you.
I have one comment to make that I have a brother in Germany who has read, I believe, almost every book that Dr. Adler has written. He is a professor at a German college.
Good.
Oh, okay, but another correction is my son has read ever since he was 5 years old, and he ended up becoming an agnostic. And I was told that it's because he was reading so much about everything, mainly about religion, that he turned into an agnostic. Is this really true? Can a person read too much?
No. You know, you can read the wrong books, of course, or poor books, but you can't read too much, no. And he when he reads more, he may change. How young is he now? How old is he?
Sorry, she's not on the line anymore.
Oh.
How about in your own situation? Are you religious, agnostic? What's your own belief?
That's a personal question.
Portland, Oregon, you're next.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Lamb and Dr. Adler.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question. TV has displaced many young readers, and in doing so, it perpetuates itself. Is TV a cause or a symptom of American educational decline?
Well, too much, the wrong TV and too much TV interferes with the right kind of reading and the right kind of study. Yes, I think that public TV, for the most part, not the special programs such as C-SPAN or some CNN programs or public television, they're educationally useful for the most part. But the children that spend hours a day watching entertaining films are wasting their time. The real trouble with most popular television is not the waste of time, there is certainly a waste of time, but the fact that it's passive. I've never seen anyone, even with the public broadcasting, PBS, where the show may have educational value, I've never seen anyone watching television with a piece of notepaper in the hand making notes. Now, you can't read a good book without making notes. If you don't make notes when you're reading a book, you're not reading. But no one treats... You relax and let the pictures flash before your mind, and it's a kind of a half-dazed condition. It isn't an active mind that watches television.
Mortimer Adler will be with us for another 30 minutes. We go to Toledo, Ohio. You're next.
Hello.
Hi.
I'd like to ask Mr. Adler a question. Mr. Adler, possibly you can help me figure out what on earth I am. For the last 22 years, I have been mentally unbalanced due to the prescription medication that was prescribed me. And over those years, and I've never had the opportunity of reading your books or the books of the great authors in the past. Through these years, I have developed within myself an understanding that I can only call intuitive. I've developed my own philosophy, my feelings towards creation, written without knowledge of the great scholars of the past, poetry, philosophy, prophesied in letters.
Connor, do you have a question, please?
Yes. What would you call this type of understanding?
I don't think I have a name for it. I'm sorry. Understanding is understanding. There's no type of understanding. Good luck.
Is it possible that somebody who had that personal experience, hadn't read anything else, developed his own intuitive philosophy, could be just as sharp and accurate and interesting as some of the great book writers?
Yes, it's possible. Unlikely, but possible. Unlikely, but possible.
Highland, California, you're next.
Oh, thank you very much, Brian. This is a marvelous program, and it's a real pleasure to listen to this gentleman after some of the others you've had on. Not that they're not good, but it's just that this is quite different. Dr. Adler, why would you say that the American educational system are graduating about 20 to 25% of their students as illiterates? And secondly,
it's more than 25% are illiterate.
Oh, is that correct?
90% are illiterate.
How many?
90.
Oh my goodness! Now
You see, reading is not taught in the schools at all. What is taught in the first 3 grades is not reading, but decoding. A person who is able to decode can read street signs and headlines. But to learn how to read a book, really read a great book, you have to have 12 or 15 years of seminars. And they're not in the schools. Most of our high school graduates, most of our college graduates can't read very well.
You teach anymore?
No.
When did you last teach?
45.
Ruston, Louisiana, you're next.
Hi there. I am interested in your opinion of that great writer back in the Revolutionary days, Thomas Paine.
Yes.
In The Age of Reason.
Yes, indeed.
I'm sure you have read it, and I'd like to have your opinion of it.
I think Thomas Paine wrote a very powerful piece of propaganda. Not a great book, but very powerful. You see, most people think that influential books are great books. Uncle Tom's Cabin was influential. Hitler's Mein Kampf was influential, but they weren't great books. No was Tom Paine's Age of Reason or Common Sense. They were very influential. They were very influential indeed, but not great.
One of those on the list of all the great books, if I remember the list correctly, is the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence?
Right. Yes.
Why?
Because they are the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution of the United States are really great pieces of documents.
What about the Federalist Papers?
Very important, and incredibly important. That is, there are 3 things in that set that every American should know and understand very well: the Constitution and the Declaration, and the Gettysburg Address, the Federalist Papers, and Tocqueville's Democracy in America. I guarantee you, I've been around to most high schools in this country, and the students in the senior year have not read the Declaration of Independence. When you conduct a seminar with them, they don't understand it.
Vista, California, go ahead, please.
Yes, I profess my ignorance to the doctor, but I'd like to ask him quickly on his views of Malcolm X.
I'm sorry, I have no views about Malcolm X.
Did you ever read anything that Malcolm X wrote?
No.
By the way, we mentioned earlier in the program that on this list of great books, no blacks.
No blacks in the set, blacks in the additional readings.
Why none in the set? Do you have any theory on that?
Yes, because I gave you the criterion. The books in the set are relevant to 25 or more, many 50 or 60 great ideas. The books written by the blacks that are in the additional readings are relevant to 1 or 2 ideas. That's all.
Austin, Texas, you're next.
Good morning. Mr. Adler, on another occasion, I think I heard you say that you had written a book comparing the ideas of Confucius and Aristotle.
No, I gave a seminar once in Aspen with a Chinese Confucian scholar called Wing Sit Chan, and we talked about how the resemblance between Confucius' moral philosophy and Aristotle's. The doctrine of the golden mean in Aristotle is also in Confucius. The one major difference between the moral philosophy of Confucius and the moral philosophy of Aristotle is that Confucius argues for piety or reverence toward ancestors.
In your book that we have here, the newest one, Truth and Religion, you wrote the following: I would be compelled to say that there cannot be logical and factual truth in any of the Far Eastern religions that are cosmological rather than theoretical in their orthodoxy. Theological. I'm having trouble just reading it, let alone understanding it. In their orthodoxies. Not in any of the theological religions that are polytheistic rather than monotheistic. What does that mean?
Well, there are two kinds of religion. Religions without God and religions with God. The religions where the cosmos, it's the world itself that is the object of, shall I say, worship, are cosmological religions. The theological religions are religions that have gods. Of the theological religions, some are monotheistic, some are polytheistic, right? I'm saying that by that criterion of the truth of philosophical theology, only the religions that are theological, not cosmological, and monotheistic, not polytheistic, can be true.
Palm Desert, California, you're next.
Good morning, Brian.
Morning.
Hi. Dr. Adler, as a former school teacher, I couldn't agree more with your definition of literacy as you related it to graduating students from our high schools and our universities, and I would probably also agree with your estimate of the numbers involved. However, relating to your great book series, of which I'm quite ignorant, I wanted to ask you whether I was ignorant of the series until today. I was interested to know whether you had found room to acknowledge James Baldwin.
Baldwin yes. A book by James Baldwin is recommended in the additional readings, not in the set. I repeat, because a book by Baldwin's book is relevant to only one or two ideas. There are 102 great ideas, and the books in the set are relevant to many of them. The books in the additional readings at the end of each chapter are relevant to only a few. Baldwin's book is like that.
When you sat around and made your decision on what you were going to include in all this, were you sensitive to the race situation in the United States, and you felt that you had to pull books into this?
No.
Never discussed it?
We never considered, we never thought in terms of quotas.
On one of the photographs here, I don't know where I put it, I showed earlier with the young man at, I think it was at Georgetown. On the bottom of it, I noticed that you wrote the author's more than 37,000 pages dealing with 3,020 topics, and for the first time includes 20th century authors, including four women writers.
The four women writers in the 19th century, George Eliot and Jane Austen. In this century, Virginia Woolf and Willa Cather.
Have the great books effort been criticized in the past by different groups because they did not include the...
No. The criticism of the great books started in 1988 at Stanford, and that is totally irrelevant. What the students at Stanford were in a required course, history course, in the history of Western civilization, a survey course, lecture course. Attached to the lecture course were some books to be read in small groups with college assistants. They had the books required in Stanford were 15. There were no books by women, no books by blacks. It was all by white European males. So they cut that list down to 4. Only 4 books were required. But a great books program, as at St. John's College in Annapolis, is 4 years of reading the great books, 125 of them, not 15 or 10 or 5. At Chicago, we read 56 of them in 2 years. Notre Dame, they read 56 or 60 in 2 years. At Thomas Aquinas College in California, they read 100 of them. That's a great books program. All this stuff in the college is totally irrelevant to what we're doing. Totally irrelevant.
Were you happy that the controversy arose at Stanford, which gave more attention to great books?
I thought it was stupid. Total misunderstanding.
You were in a lot more demand after that controversy.
I know that, but I'm not that.
Palm Beach, Florida, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, and thank you for C-SPAN.
Thank you.
I have Encyclopedia Britannica, of course, and I admire Dr. Adler. I was wondering, well, I didn't come into the room immediately upon his introduction, so I missed, and it was said that there were 8 great religions, or
10.
All right. My question is, if there are 10 great religions and we were to study them all, and that then we would find the truth, is that correct?
No, I don't think that's the. You have to do more than study them. There are courses in our universities by sociologists and anthropologists called comparative religion, and that kind of sociological, anthropological approach is not my approach. The philosophical approach is to know the difference between poetical and logical truth, understand the demands of logical truth, and apply those demands to the 10 religions of the world. You see, this is a very special book. The subtitle of that book is an essay in the philosophy of religion. There are very few books, if any at all, like it. Really, the philosophical approach to religion from the point of view of no religion. See, there are lots of books which are called apologetical. There are Christians who defend Christianity, Jews who defend Judaism, Muslims who defend Islam. This book defends no religion, merely asks questions.
Can you recall the 10 right off the top of your head?
Yes.
Want to try?
I can do better than that. There's a diagram here.
Okay.
It has all 10 of them, maybe more than
Why don't I find that while we're taking a call, because we have somebody on the line.
right.
San Diego, go ahead, please. San Diego, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Ryan, it's a great program. I have to say to Mortimer that one comment and one question. And the comment was, with the beginning of C-SPAN, I do watch TV with a pencil and paper in my hand.
Good.
All right. Now, Mortimer, I sometimes have a problem understanding people, and your voice is a little tough for me also. What was I didn't understand you when you said your favorite of the great books.
Aristotle.
Carousel.
Yes.
Aristotle.
Yes.
Oh, Aristotle. Okay, I couldn't.
Aristotle.
I'm sorry.
Old man Aristotle.
It's more my problem than yours.
Rhymes with bottle.
Thank you. And why is Aristotle your favorite?
Wiser than any other philosopher there is.
Who is what's your second choice on that great books list?
Plato. Whitehead once, in a book called Adventures of Ideas, said,
Alfred North Whitehead?
Yes, said that the history of Western philosophy is a series of footnotes to Plato. And I added to that, Aristotle wrote all the footnotes.
What do you think of Socrates?
He's in Plato. That's Plato.
Rochester, New York. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Adler, Brian, I think this is a fabulous program, and this is one of my greatest heroes. Dr. Adler, is it true that you went to Columbia and that you refused to take swimming?
I did more than refuse to take swimming. I never went to gym. I refused to take physical education. And so when I was at the top of my class in 1923, but they didn't give me a diploma. However, Columbia relented in 1983, 6 years later, they gave me my diploma.
I had heard that story, and I wondered if it was true.
It's true. I marched with the undergraduates in 1983.
Thanks for the call. Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Shinto, Sikhism, Taoism, and Jainism?
Jainism.
What's
That's more than 10. There's about 12 there. But
what is Jainism?
It's an Hindu religion, an Indian religion.
Here's the list. What's the most difficult to understand of all these religions? Have you studied them all?
That's an impossible question. They're all difficult to understand. I think probably the most difficult is Buddhism.
What's the largest followed?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Next call, we go to Los Angeles. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello, Dr. Adler.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your interest in man and mankind. A few years ago, before Dr. Toynbee passed away, he had a discussion with Daisaku Ikeda of Japan, and they published their discussion in a book called The Toynbee-Ikeda Dialogue, Man Himself Must Choose. Are you familiar with that work?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Fascinating work. Dr. Adler, in the book, Daisaku Ikeda of the Nichiren Shoshu Sokugakai had discussed the concept of three proofs, which Nichiren Daishonin, a 12th century Buddhist monk, had discussed in many of his writings. Those three proofs were proofs which people could use to determine the validity of a religion. One proof, he said, was that every true religion must have a theoretical proof, an actual body of writings which could be dealt with over time. Another proof, the second proof, was a scientific proof that religion must adhere to the norms of science as they are discovered.
Right, I agree to the second point, certainly.
Okay. And the third proof they discussed was the importance for a religion to be actually proven in the lives of the people who practice the religion.
I don't think that's a proof.
Why is that, sir?
I don't think there's no way of testing that. You can test the consistency of the religion or the coherence of the religion with the existing state of scientific knowledge, but you can't test its practical usefulness.
Our guest is Mortimer Adler. He lives in Chicago. He is the chairman. He's the chairman of the Board of Editors and editor-in-chief of the great books
of the Western World. Of the second edition. Bob Hutchins was editor-in-chief of the first edition. I was his associate editor.
And the second, if you just joined us, the second edition is out now. How do you buy the Encyclopedia Britannica? I know that's...
Well, you can either buy it over the counter in bookstores or in malls where Britannica has desks, or you can buy it from salesmen in your home.
And you said earlier it's $1,500 if you just want to buy the great book series alone.
About $1,500 for the least expensive binding.
What if somebody's sitting in the audience, they're past school age, they've had their college and all that stuff, and they're sitting there fairly mind-boggled by all these theories and all this stuff, and they say, how do I better educate myself?
Buy the great books and read them.
But what if I have not the ability to understand all that I'm reading?
They're written for the great thing about the great books are not written by specialists, by generalists, and they can be read by anyone at all.
You say in your book, this book here on reforming education, I believe, if I remember reading it, that you should buy books that you're reading up.
That's right. You always ought to read things over your head. If you read things at your head's level, your head doesn't get any higher.
When you want to read something at this stage in your life, after 88 years, that's above you, what do you read?
I go back and read some more great books.
Next call, Huntington, West Virginia, for Dr. Mortimer Adler. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Brian. Good morning, Doctor. Enjoy your program.
Thanks.
Doctor, I'd like to ask you, religion, and religion is supposed to teach a nation how we're supposed to live?
No.
Well, who are we supposed to follow in?
No. Religion is concerned beyond science and philosophy with either the supernatural, which is beyond nature, or with aspects of nature that are beyond scientific discovery, and is concerned, the ultimate point of religion is the salvation of souls. I mean, what do you get out of this life? How do you prepare yourself for something better than this life? All the religions of the world are concerned with that, somehow. Elevating you somehow above the secular, above the humdrum of everyday life.
Why are there so many wars fought over religion?
I don't know, but certainly more damage has been done in this world in the name of religion than anything else. Just think of what's going on in the Near East now. The Holy War. Not utter nonsense, of course, but think of Northern Ireland. And, I mean, all the troubled spots in the world are due to religion. As well as oil.
In your 88 years, where would you place this year and the problems we have compared to all the other things you've seen in your life?
Well, if it hadn't been for Saddam Hussein, suppose the Persian Gulf crisis hadn't happened, I would have said 1990 is a great year. There's more chance now of world peace than ever before. The Cold War has ended, communism has ended, totalitarianism has ended. We're on a new, leaving that Islamic nonsense out for a moment. If you can just imagine the world without Islam. Imagine it, with oil somehow available. The advances made in the last 2 years, I think due to Michael Gorbachev. I really think he should have won the Peace Prize.
So you agreed with him getting
Oh,
it.
completely. The book I'm publishing in March is dedicated to Michael Gorbachev. It's a book called Haves Without Have-Nots. The subtitle is Essays for the 21st Century on Democracy and Socialism. And the reason why that's very important is because most Americans utterly confuse socialism and communism. So communism is the wrong method of achieving socialism. Communism is the wrong method of achieving socialism. Marx was a socialist before he was a communist. He was right in being a socialist and wrong in being a communist.
Montreal.
Clear?
Montreal. You're next.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I'm a great fan of Dr. Adler's because I'm a speed reader teacher.
Oh, no. No, you can't be a fan of mine and be a speed reader. I'm a slow reader, and I never want to speed read in my life, except the newspaper.
Might be interested in reading the great books of the Western world, and
You can't speed read them.
you can't?
No.
I do.
Well, I would like to differ with you. I think you have to read them word by word. You have to ponder the sentences.
But
when I'm reading a great book, I never read faster than 20 pages an hour, and sometimes slower than that. And it's hard work. I never read except by sitting at my desk with a paper and pencil in my hand, and I never read more than an hour or an hour and a half, because I would get very tired.
Let our Montreal caller defend speed reading. Do you teach speed reading?
Yes, I do.
You teach speed reading of the great books?
I teach speed reading of the great books of the Western world, and we encourage people. The first edition had 52 volumes, and we try to...
54.
Sorry?
54 volumes.
54 volumes?
Yeah.
Well, we worked with 52, and we try to encourage people to read one a week.
Oh, my God. Impossible. Absolutely impossible.
Now, as long as this gentleman's on the line, would you, if you had a choice of speed reading
or no reading,
or no reading at all?
No reading.
Really?
Yes.
What do you think of that, Professor?
I think that I'm encouraging reading, and I'm encouraging college students to read and to take notes. And I believe that no reading, if you can read, is a travesty.
Dr. Adler, don't agree? Morristown, New Jersey, you're next.
Yes.
Last call.
Congratulations, Ryan. Great show here. I have a question for Dr. Adler. It has to do with a colleague of his went to school with him in Columbia.
Who's that?
This is Dr. Herbert Schwartz.
Oh, yes, I know Herbert Schwartz.
He passed away.
He's died, yes.
81. What was your reaction?
He got me into more trouble than anybody else.
Excuse me?
He got me in a great deal of trouble. I taught St. Thomas Aquinas in my Great Books course, and some of my students were converted to Catholicism. Some of my Jewish students and Protestant students were converted to Catholicism. And I was charged with converting them. I didn't convert them. Herbert Schwartz did. And people always blame me for doing it.
How did he convert them?
He was a Catholic himself. And he was a converted Catholic. And converted Catholics are, of course, great converters of others.
In general, and I assume you teach seminars from time to time and
always
groups.
At Aspen, I teach seminars all summer long.
Are people in general becoming more aware, less aware?
I can't answer that question. That's a sociological generalization I can't make.
Are you as stimulated today when you talk to audiences as you've ever been?
Yes.
You came to Washington for what purpose?
To address the press club yesterday.
How was the experience?
Wonderful.
Had you ever done it before?
Oh, yeah. At press club? No, I've addressed audiences in Washington before, many times.
And what did you think of the questions?
Very good. Most of the people that asked questions had read the great books. It was a very, very well read audience.
Do you find, and we had a couple calls like this morning, people said, I don't know who you are, and then most people said, though, Dr. Adler, it's great to talk to you, I've followed you all your life. Do you find that people in this country are in that category, they all know you or they don't know you at all?
Most of them, I'm surprised at how many people know me and how many people have read my books. It's delightful. I really think I ought to keep on writing.
What do you want your legacy to be?
The books I've written, more than anything else.
You've written 46.
And the great books. And most of all, those 102 essays. You don't know how hard it is to write 100. Ever thought about writing 102 essays? That's 10,000 words. More, 12,000 words. That was the hard, and I had to revise them all for the second edition, because by adding 60 new authors, I had to get the essays refer and quote from the authors. I had 60 more authors to add to the set. You see, so I had to revise those 102 essays. That was a hard job.
Our guest is the chairman of the board of editors at Encyclopedia Britannica. He's also editor-in-chief of the 1990 edition of the Great Books of the Western World. As he told us earlier, Encyclopedia Britannica is owned by the University of Chicago, and he is here talking about also his latest of the 46 books he has written, a book called Truth in Religion by Mortimer J. Adler. And before we say goodbye to you, what's the next book you're writing, and when will it be out?
A book called Haves Without Have-Nots, Essays for the 21st Century on Democracy and Socialism, out on March 15th, 1991.
Dr. Mortimer Adler, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.